After 6 days of voting, Italian lawmakers have re-elected President Sergio Mattarella after they failed to find a successor.
Russian President Vladimir Putin vows to continue with talks despite Moscow saying that NATO allies and the US have ignored his security demands. 2,000 residents in the Netherlands are angry over an application from an oil and gas company to continue extraction until 2050.
Ash Barty wins the Australian Open, becoming the first Aussie to win the single women's final for 44 years. Sergio Mattarella was re-elected president in the 8th round of voting when he passed 505 votes out of 1,009. Applause broke out in Parliament, prompting the Chamber of Deputies president to interrupt his reading aloud of the ballots. The count then resumed, with Mattarella continuing on to win 759 votes. These conditions impose on us. We must not shirk from the duties to which we are called, and naturally we must prevail over other considerations and different personal perspectives with commitment, responding to the expectations and hopes of our fellow citizens. Premier Mario Draghi had initially put himself forward as a candidate, but as the voting dragged on he backed Mattarella and helped persuade him not to retire despite being 80 years old, and when his second term ends he'll be 87. Our correspondent says not everyone has supported the candidacy of Sergio Mattarella. In fact, this choice has created divisions inside parties and above all inside the centre-right. Let's see how this might impact the government in the next months.
Euronews, Roma.
Over 1,000 MPs and regional representatives voted 7 times, and still they couldn't come up with a new president for Italy. And as the stalemate continued, it looked like the country could become politically unstable. So party leaders begged the current 80-year-old Sergio Mattarella to remain in his post. Despite repeatedly saying he didn't want to, he's now signed up for another 7-year term. Despite his age, Mattarella is a unifying figure, and all main party leaders agreed on his re-election. The post is largely ceremonial, but it has an important role in the event of a political crisis, in a country whose political landscape is very fragmented. The President has the power to dissolve Parliament, to appoint the Prime Minister, and to refuse government coalitions that he or she considers too fragile. That last power is vital, as there have been over 60 governments since the Second World War, but only 12 presidents. Premier Mario Draghi had previously indicated he'd be willing to become president, but some party leaders feared that would prompt an early election. There was also a consensus that Draghi's departure would weaken the economic recovery after the pandemic. It would also have put into question a number of reforms that must be implemented if Italy is to get tens of billions of euros from the European post-COVID recovery plan.
Honouring 500 cadets who died defending Kiev in 1918 against the invading Russian Red Army. Ukrainian civilians and military members took part in the commemorative march on Saturday with the threat of another conflict hanging over them. The West has warned Moscow against any aggression, but Russia denies any intention to attack. In 2014, Oletsky organised a large-scale demonstration in the Donetsk region to preserve the unity of Ukraine, but he and his family ended up fleeing to Kiev.
I never ever in my life thought it could happen, in my worst nightmare. And this is why I guess, currently, I'm prepared that Russia might attack.
Russian military equipment and troops continue to arrive in Belarus. Moscow says it's part of a joint 10-day military exercise scheduled for February the 10th. So far, the US, UK and the European Union's diplomacy hasn't altered Russia's plans.
There is no reshaping of the European security architecture that results in a Ukraine that pivots back to Russia. So I really don't even think that the diplomat giving him a lot of what he wanted on the diplomatic track would be sufficient. I think, unfortunately, we're headed towards a major military offensive in Europe.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the West not to panic over the 100,000 Russian troops along its eastern border, urging calm. Zelensky also said if there was a war in Ukraine, it would spill out into the rest of Europe. So diplomacy talks will continue, with President Putin at the centre of everyone's attention. 2,000 people in southern Rotterdam have signed a petition urging authorities not to issue a licence which would allow oil and gas extraction to continue until 2050. The company, NAM, has extracted fossil fuels underneath some 70,000 homes for the last 38 years. However, gas production from its Groningen gas field caused earthquakes in 2012. Especially because it makes you think about what happened in Groningen. You compare the oil extraction in Rotterdam to that in Groningen and it makes you wonder what impact it will have on me as a resident. You don't want to inject chemicals into the soil. That goes directly against the climate targets we have set. We want to use less oil and gas, not more. In the licence application, the controversial technique of fracking is mentioned, which uses chemicals. NAM supplies 75% of the country's natural gas to Dutch households and businesses. And it says the probability of earthquakes from oil extraction is very small. The Ministry of Economic Affairs will now assess if the extraction plan meets all safety requirements.
It was going to be one of the world's biggest lithium mines, but after several months of protests led by environmental activists, the mining giant Rio Tinto called a halt to the project. Local communities say their water supply would have been contaminated and that many people would have had to relocate. But Rio Tinto say they would have followed EU environmental standards. President Alexander Vučić says the lithium could have fueled a lucrative industry, producing batteries for electric cars and computers. Annual revenues, if only we had them, would be 600 million euros a year. If we only went to the factory for the production of batteries and cathodes, our income would no longer be 600 million euros, but 3.4 billion annually. Look, 3.4 billion times 56 years. The government's also stressed that the economy must diversify and the mine would have created 2,000 jobs. President Vučić had previously promised a referendum on whether the mine should go ahead. For many it's a missed opportunity, including the professor of Belgrade University's Faculty of Engineering. The key player in this story is the state, so the state has not done its study, a cost-benefit analysis. Even after the large protests, it's possible Rio Tinto may get its mining licence back. Prime Minister Ana Brnabić has accused the multinational of not giving communities near the site of the mine enough information. Then last month she said the government would make a decision on whether the project can resume after the general elections in April. Ash Barty has beaten Danielle Collins at the Australian Open to become the first Aussie woman to win on home ground for 44 years. She recovered from 5-1 down in the second set to beat Danielle Collins 6-3, 7-6 in the final on Saturday night. Incredibly, she won the title without dropping a set over a fortnight of matches. It makes Barty the first Australian women's singles champion since Chris O'Neill in 1978. The 25-year-old has made a remarkable career comeback after taking time off and missing every Grand Slam tournament in 2015 and 16.
Salvador Dali was obsessed with Sigmund Freud's interpretation of dreams when he was a very young artist. And now a new exhibition in Vienna is displaying around 100 of Dali's objects, paintings and works which were influenced by Freud's writings. The two men met in London in July 1938, and that meeting is being explored in the exhibition. So here we cover a good decade of Salvador Dali's life and art, allowing us to show the public aspects of Salvador Dali's work that are not yet known and not often shown. Through Freud's writings, Dali found the key to hidden fears and desires that had accompanied him since childhood. Dali had lost his brother and mother during adolescence, and his father was authoritarian, who married his deceased wife's sister.